So we're so addicted to wanting the same experience again and again and again and again and again that we block ourselves from a new experience. And that's why we all live in this nostalgia of, oh, life used to be amazing back in the day. Why don't I allow myself to create the best new alternative? And so the more we can allow ourselves to realize that our last experience wasn't the best or the worst, it was just a experience. And why don't I go and create a unique and different experience, not a better or a worse one? We always compare things as better or worse, but really everything is different or unique. Is a flower better than another flower? Is a tree better than another tree? They're not, they're just unique and different. And I think we see that in nature. Like, you don't go and go, that bird and that bird, I don't like that bird, I don't like that feather. You just appreciate the uniqueness and the diversity and the difference. And even in experiences in our life, we have to focus on creating unique, different, diverse experiences as opposed to wanting better or worse things to happen.
The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs. Sharing our vulnerability. Overcoming our fears. Transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go?
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is... This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Jay Shetty, the British motivational speaker, viral content creator, author, and former monk. Born and raised in London, you moved to India at age 22 to live as a monk, and for 3 years, meditated for up to 8 hours a day, learning the ancient practices of breath work and mind control. Today, you share your learnings with audiences around the world with the mission, Make Wisdom Go Viral. You were named in the Forbes 30 Under 30 for being a pioneer in the world of digital media and have spoken to companies like Google, NASDAQ, and HSBC. Your videos have accumulated over 7.5 billion views, and your #1 podcast, On Purpose, has hosted Deepak Chopra, Kobe Bryant, and Tim Ferriss. Your upcoming book, Think Like a Monk, distills the timeless wisdom you learned in India into practical steps anyone can follow to live a more meaningful life. Jay, welcome to London Real.
Ryan, really grateful and happy to be with you. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Hey man, it's great to have you here. And most people probably don't know that you've actually been to the studio before. You were here with, I guess, your mentor, was Radhadat Swami, I call him like the OG monk, the OG gangster monk. I mean, he's been there and done that. When you learn about this guy, he hitchhiked from London to the Himalayas. He used to, I think, chant with Prabhupada in Tompkins Square Park in New York City. He actually built the Hare Krishna temple that was in my movie Iron Mind. We knew a bunch of people. And he came here with you, and really, it was an amazing episode. That guy's got incredible energy. But one of the things I got to say about you, Jay, is that you came in with him, and I didn't even know it was you, because I think you're so respectful to him, and you were respectful to his time that you let him kind of have his moment here. And it took me 30 minutes to realize it was you. So that showed me a lot about your character, the fact that you kind of let him do his thing. So I appreciate that. And tell me, what does that man mean to you?
Well, that's very kind of you. And I'm so glad that I did get to see your beautiful studio and your amazing team. And it's incredible to see what you're creating out there. Truly, it's so, so powerful. And yeah, I really believe that when you are in a certain person's presence, when they're your mentors, when they're your guides, when they're your teachers, it's beautiful to just be a sponge that absorbs and doesn't try to take that energy or attention away. And so the way I would describe it from an analogy in the Vedas would be the firefly doesn't try and compete with the sun. And in the darkness, the firefly tries to take the attention and it thinks that it's glowing up the whole world, but really it's just this bright. And in the light, when the sun comes out, it's like you can just bask in that greatness. So for me, when I'm around people like yourself, people like Radhan Swami, other mentors that I have in my life, I'm just a sponge wanting to learn and absorb. And I'm grateful that I've been trained in that way and exposed to that way of thinking, because I feel that when you're in that position as a consistent learner and a student, you're always in a safe place. You have very little room for your ego to take over. There's very little space for illusion and Maya to have its hold. And you actually get some breathing space to just be and live and be human. And it's liberating. So that's kind of how it felt that day.
Well, I was impressed. And when I had heard that you trained under Radhan, because I had heard you had been a monk before, but I didn't know the details. And when I heard you trained under him, I was like, okay, Jay's the real deal. Because that man, I mean, if you look at his CV and then also just being in his presence, I must say, like, I've been around a lot of people, but there's something special about him. And he connected with me in a weird spiritual energy level that's kind of hard to describe. And I know you might expect me to say that or feel that about a monk, but really, there's something special about him. And he's the guy actually that said, Jay, maybe you shouldn't be a monk anymore. And it's one of the things that you've spoken about before. Maybe you can tell me a little bit about that moment and even the time you spent with him in India, because that's a big part of your story and it's why you're here today. And I think it was also kind of a weird, humbling moment too.
Absolutely. Yeah. That conversation, there were two parts to it. Parts of it happened in India, parts of it actually happened in London. And the one that I want to share with you today is the one that happened in London. And I was driving His Holiness Radhanath Swami to the airport, and we were in a car together, and I was sharing with him my almost self-reflection and awareness and where it had got me. Now, this is the interesting thing about monk life, is that it creates such an extreme level of self-acceptance and awareness that I got to the point in hindsight now that I realized I wasn't meant to be a monk. And so I'm sharing this with the person that has given me their guidance and steer, and I've been involved in his life and learnings. And it's so hard to admit to someone that you respect that you might feel like this isn't right for you anymore. And it was one of those moments where you got to pluck the courage from within to just be like, I don't think this is who I am or who I'm meant to be. And having his affirmation and having his blessing to say that actually, and there's a particular example that he gave me on that journey, which again, like you said, it sounds really simple, but it had such a profound impact on my internal confidence. So he said to me, he goes, people go to university. And he said, some people become professors inside the university, and some people go out and become entrepreneurs. He goes, which ones are better? And I said, neither, each to their own. It just depends on who you are and what you want to do with your life. And he goes, well, that's exactly the scenario you're in right now. He said, some monks come to the school and they become professors in the school and they stay in the school forever and continue to teach. And some monks come for their training and then they go out and then they still try and represent and share all those teachings in the world. And he said, that's your choice. Neither is better or worse. And that for me was like, it took the pressure away that I was placing on myself that I had failed or that I was going to make a mistake by leaving, because I didn't understand what was coming next. So that was that conversation.
Wow. Do you think he knew? Do you think he knew this was coming from you?
In his humility, he'd say he didn't, even now. And I definitely didn't know. And I think that's the beauty of what I love about being a witness or an observer in your own life, is that you kind of get surprised, excited, delighted. And for me, I look at my life today and consider it to be a real blessing and responsibility. And I can honestly say, hand on my heart, that I never imagined even 1% of what currently is happening in my life to ever happen.
Well, it's a pretty incredible story. I mean, for people that don't know, you're here in London, you grew up in London, when you're 16, you kind of you had some hard times. You lost a couple friends to death, I think a car accident and some gang violence, and it sounded like you were turning into a bit of a punk yourself. How did you get from there to becoming a monk? Maybe bring people up to speed, because not many young men do that? Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I don't know, maybe like 0.01% of people maybe. And again, I was in that same 0.01%. You know, I grew up as what I would consider a good, obedient son until the age of 14. I followed the rules. I checked the boxes. I did my best at school. I was respectful at home. And I got to a point where it wasn't satisfying to just be good for the sake of being good. Now in hindsight, I realize I felt like I needed a purpose and meaning in my life to apply that goodness to. So being good for being good's sake was not good enough. And at the same time, at that time, because I was young and 14, I didn't know what meaning and purpose were. So I saw it as seeking a thrill. And I was looking for a thrill in life. And thrill came through adventure sports. It came through getting involved in punk-like activities, as you said. Thrill comes from doing all the wrong things or the bad things when you're growing up because they're forbidden. And I think there's something about that forbidden fruit that makes you feel like you're discovering something. And so now in hindsight, I realized what I was really looking for was discovery and meaning and purpose. But at the time, it took the form of thrill and, you know, irrelevant activities and the wrong actions. And so seeing that path and getting a glimpse of it, I also realized that being bad for being bad's sake didn't work out either. So on one extreme, being good for being good's sake didn't work. And on the other side, being bad for being bad's sake didn't work either. And I was consistently seeking that deeper fulfillment. And to me, the opening is what you do so wonderfully with your show. And what I believe so many creators today are trying to do is we have to allow ourselves to be exposed to people with counterintuitive ideas or alternative ways of life that we've never been exposed to. So if you think about any generation today, they're exposed to athletes, actors, singers, musicians, business people. Nothing wrong with that at all. But if you never really get to the depths of the people behind the people, or if you never get exposed to any other ideas, you start thinking that life is about a finite number of options and a finite number of paths. And so while I was on that path of thinking, like when I was growing up, the most celebrated thing to be in the world of business was an investment banker. Like if you were a hedge fund manager or an investment banker, you had made it. And I had no interest in investment banking or hedge fund management. But because that's what I saw in society, I was thinking that that's what I'll probably graduate and do. So while I was at university, I was always fascinated to go and hear speakers, whether it was entrepreneurs, CEOs, celebrities. And that was a time, I guess, you know, when I was at university, it was 2007 to 2010. There wasn't a ton of content on these topics readily available like there is today. And so you'd actually have to turn up in person. And I was fascinated by people who went from nothing to something. I've always been fascinated by rags to riches stories. And I remember the first books I ever read were David Beckham's autobiography and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's autobiography. And I just loved how much pain and struggle they'd been through. And I loved learning about how they navigated their challenges. I loved learning about how David Beckham used to, every weekend when his friends were out partying and out doing their thing, he would be in the park practicing how to take free kicks. And I valued that. I valued the level of sacrifice that it took. And so I was already into that. And then I was invited to hear a monk speak. And I was thinking, what has a monk achieved? Like, you know, what am I going to learn from a monk? And I genuinely had that limiting punk-like belief that what can I learn from a monk? And my friends who were getting more involved in spirituality and meditation, they were the ones encouraged me to come along. And I said, well, I'll only go if we go to a bar afterwards. And the reason why I share that is I want people to realize the state of my consciousness at the time. I did not grow up spiritual or religious. I didn't grow up as a monk. I didn't grow up like an angel. Like, you know, I was just a normal guy growing up in London. And that was what I said to my friends. They agreed because they're good friends and they knew what would happen, I guess. And I turn up having very low expectations of hearing this monk speak. And it's the irony of life that you go there expecting nothing and you find everything. And when I say that, what I mean is there was a slightly captivating energy. And I've heard people say this about other monks and teachers that they've met as well. Like, I think I read somewhere that Julia Roberts said it when she first saw a picture of Neem Karoli Baba, who was involved, people like Steve Jobs and Mark Zuckerberg and others have been involved in his teachings and his traditions. And there was that captivating element, and you're wondering what it is, because here in front of me was standing an Indian man from India in robes, wasn't externally like attracting me as I would be attracted to the opposite sex, but I was having the same sort of draw and pull towards what he was saying. And what he was saying was like opening out and penetrating my heart. And he was saying that our gifts and skills are wasted if they're not used in the service of others. And that was the first time I'd ever heard about service and compassion and love. And I was just like, not only does that start to resonate, he also just has this captivating presence. And I start going, I want that. Like, I want to be around that. And so I remember now that, when I was 18 in my life, I'd met people who were rich. I'd met people who were famous. I'd met people who were beautiful. I'd met people who were strong and powerful. But I don't know if I'd met anyone who was truly happy and content. And that day I felt that he, who I still have a relationship with now, I really felt that he was happy and content. And I started to feel that may be looking for that deep meaning and purpose in life, may be actually the path that I haven't yet trodden. So that's kind of how that whole journey began.
Wow. I mean, you must have been pretty mature for your age, because it took me 40 years to figure out the message that service was the way. And I want to get into it because you talk about it in your book. But like, it took me a while because, in my teens and 20s and even in my 30s, it was about me. I was basically the hedge fund manager guy. So I'm kind of amazed that you could be open-minded to that, because I'm sure a lot of your peers were thinking the same kind of thing, right?
Yeah, I really owe that to the teachers. And that's what I mean, Brian, with what I was saying about your show and what you're doing and what I'm trying to do, is that if you don't experience compassion, you won't really believe it exists. And the only way you experience compassion is if you sit in the presence of someone who has unlimited compassion. And so I feel like when you're growing up, you're surrounded by people who have an addiction to wealth, or you're surrounded by people who have an addiction to laziness, or you're surrounded by people who have an obsession or an absorption with status and power. And so all you're experiencing is that experience. And all of a sudden, when you throw and again, it doesn't have to be a monk, it could be anyone who shows you this, right? It's not specifically to do with being a monk. But when you meet a monk who's embodying love and compassion and mastery of the mind, you all of a sudden start experiencing it, and you go, oh, it's possible, it exists, like you feel it. And I think that's what, there's a beautiful statement by, I believe it's from St. Francis, and he says that, you should preach all day. You should preach all day, and sometimes you should open your mouth. and it's that belief that, the energy is contained in someone's presence and the way they live their life, even without opening their mouth or ever saying anything.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. And it's funny, I'm thinking about my own life as I'm listening to you. I mean, I never had anybody when I grew up. I told you I was from San Diego, 18 years there. I never had a chance to be around someone like that, I mean, the closest thing is I saw, Hare Krishnas walking down the street in Pacific Beach. But again, I didn't know their vibe. I'd heard people that had gone there, but I never let myself do that. Then when I went to MIT, I'm around a bunch of overachievers who, let's be honest, we were about our grades and our future. And then went out to Wall Street at 22. I mean, I'm around a bunch of overachievers that are about themselves. So I guess I never really was around those people until the last 9 years I've been doing this show. I'm around vibes and of people that, they always, I'm telling you, Jay, the guys, the original gangsters at the end of the show, there's probably 100 of them I've had on the show. They all say the same message at the end, which is kind of, we are all one. And I've had it told to me by monks. I've had it told to me by bodybuilders, by everybody. But I always get this uniting message at the end. So that's definitely something I feel. So yeah, I kind of know what you mean, that you were around that presence before. So what was it like being the monk? I mean, just to kind of finish that chapter off before we get into a bunch of the other current events. I mean, when you look back, I think it was 3 years that you spent there. I'm sure you're always reprocessing it, but what was it like?
It was like being at a school for the mind. And it was like being at school. And I remember the first day, one of the first things one of the teachers told us is, do not think that you have come to heaven. You've just been admitted into a hospital. And he said, in this hospital, sometimes the doctors will act like patients. And that is part of the lesson, as much as sometimes you as patients will be able to help the doctors. And so don't feel that anyone here is free of the disease. We've all come here to become purified. And so that was kind of like day one setup of, don't expect everyone around here to be perfect. Actually expect that there will be imperfection, but it is through that you will be tested and learn. And so it was just, for me, it was like a beautiful way to not just let these concepts like compassion and ego just be words and themes and ideas. They became real, where you are now seeing them in every interaction and monitoring them in your own mind and heart, and knowing how to navigate the pulls and the distractions and all of that. So in terms of a daily practice, we'd wake up every day at 4 a.m. So that was the set rule. You had to wake up at 4 a.m. That was hard. That was seriously hard for me in the beginning. I've never been a late waker up, but I've never waken up that early, and I really love sleep. So I used to wake up at 4 a.m. 4:30 a.m. would be collective prayers and meditation. That would run till 5:15. 5:15 to 7:15 would be independent meditation. And then 7:15, there'd be some more collective prayers. And then 8 to 9 a.m. would be a class given on the Bhagavad Gita or the Vedas. And that would be a class from a senior monk. And she'd be listening for an hour. And then 9 a.m. was breakfast. So just adapting to that new morning was hard, because I'm used to waking up, having breakfast first thing in the morning, filling my stomach up and feeling satisfied, maybe working out a little bit. And we would do yoga there as well. But reshifting would literally feel like not only did I shower my body, but that morning practice and routine literally feel like I'd bathed my mind in the morning. Like imagine your mind feeling like fresh and awake. And that's really what I feel that morning did. So that's what we would do. And then the rest of the day would be different. It would be a mixture of more meditation and study. It would be what I describe as like the monk experience I had was the morning was about the self, and the rest of the day was about service. And that's why I chose the path, because I really believe that we need both areas in our life. We need time to focus on ourselves, but then we need to go out there and make a difference. And so we were distributing food to the homeless or children of India. We were taking part in building this sustainable village. We were involved in philanthropic activities, which really felt so purposeful to me and made me feel like I was doing the right thing in my 20s, because I was thinking, for 4 years while I was at college, I was half of it interning at finance companies in London, and the other half spending in India just experimenting and living with the monks. And that was like my first A/B test. And I would go from bars, as you know very well, you know better than I do, I'd be going from bars, steakhouses, and wearing suits in the summer to sleeping on the floor, waking up at 4 a.m. and meditating for 4 hours a day. And when I compared them in those summers, I became confident that the monk life was more purposeful and meaningful to me at that time in my life.
Wow. Okay. Difficult process over those 3 years? Were there challenging parts? And I guess towards the end of it, did you started to wonder if this was a long-term thing for you?
Yeah, I think the difficult moments initially were the adapting to the morning, because that in and of itself is such a big extreme habit shift. You're waking up at 4 a.m., you're having cold showers, and you don't have a legitimate place to sleep. So everyone sleeps on a different mat in a different place every different day, because you're training your mind for adaptability and detachment. So that's a lot. I mean, I'm a kid from London who has a bedroom, and even though it's not big, my parents are not well off, I still have my bedroom and it's my space. And it's very clearly my space. And all of a sudden you're now living on the other end of the extreme. But I just started to find very quickly, I'd say after the first 1 to 3 months, I started to find such an affinity for the lifestyle because I understood why we were doing it. And I think that's the difference in all of struggle is when you look at what you're doing in the struggle, it will never make sense. And as soon as you understand why you're going through the struggle, it all makes sense. And I started to realize my mind was becoming more adaptable and flexible. What happened after 3 years is after learning and growing and absorbing and reflecting, I came to the reflection that I had this desire to want to share what I was learning in a really practical, accessible, and relevant way. I had that because I would read something in scripture and I could connect it to a movie that I'd seen, or I would read a verse of this 5,000-year-old literature and be able to connect it to a science study or a marketing exercise that I did at college. And I was just like, this is so exciting to me. Like I'm getting my passion from seeing connections between this timeless wisdom and the modern world. And I really want to bring those two together. And I started to realize that that desire was not the desire of wanting to live like a monk forever. And that was the hardest pill to swallow because I would have loved to have done it from there, but I had to allow myself to accept the sacredness of what monk life is. And that's why it's so hard because you almost realize that this is sacred and my desire may be outside of what that is. And I've got to learn to accept that because I'm going to feel unfulfilled if I don't do that. So that's what I kind of came to after those 3 years of reflection and awareness and acceptance and coming back. And I traveled. I spent time in London as a monk and in Europe. But when I actually came back and I moved back in with my parents, that was possibly the lowest moment of my life because I came back to the noise that I had left, which was, if you become a monk, you're never going to make money again. If you become a monk, you're wasting all of this effort you put into your education. If you become a monk, then who's ever going to hire you? You know, that's the noise that I had left. And to now come back and almost prove it all right, it was all of a sudden like my ego was going through a massive humbling because now my parents and extended family members and everyone around me was wondering, wait, did you fail at becoming a monk? Like, are you back? Like, what? You know, they couldn't understand it.
And did you end up processing that at some point? And finally, I mean, I guess you did. And then you started to express yourself, right?
Yeah, for a month, I'd say I kind of fell back into my default habits. So I started waking up late. The first thing I did was buy some Cadbury's chocolate and enjoy it and devour it because I hadn't eaten chocolate for a while. I remember just kind of falling into, I started listening to Drake again. I remember very vividly. And it was almost like I kind of like flipped back really quickly into the me before this journey. And then a month in, I started to realize that everything I'd learned as a monk was setting me up for this journey in my life. And that being a monk was like being at school, and that now I was in the exam. And I had to test whether what I learned at school actually helped me pass the exam of life. And I had great faith and confidence that this wisdom was applicable, but it was almost like when I left, I was forced to put it all into practice. And that's why now what I'm sharing, and especially with writing this book, it's like, I'm only sharing everything that I've tested and experimented with over the last 7 years. So these are truths that have been around for thousands of years. And I've just taken them, broken them down into habits and strategies and tools, and I've put them into practice. And I can genuinely, hand on my heart, say that I have seen them all proven to be true through my personal life experience of trying to implement the wisdom in reality.
Were you ever close to not making it? Like, were you ever close to just going back and to the hedge fund, or worse, just staying at home and not figuring it out? Or were you confident you would have got here sooner or later?
Yeah, good question. If I'm completely honest, I'd say I was in a complete state of uncertainty and confusion when I got back. And so I would go to the library every day. I'd get dressed up like I was going to work. I'd go to the library every day. I'd read business books, personal development books to kind of get my mind back in that space. And I would read spiritual books. And I started applying to companies because my parents were not well off and I needed to pay the bills. So I started applying to jobs that I would have worked at. So banks and consulting firms and finance companies. And I got rejected from 40 companies before interview. Because guess what? I had monk on my resume for 3 years, and no one wants to hire a monk. Surprise, surprise! Like, what's your transferable skills? Silence and stillness. Like, I mean, no one wants that in their company. So, people couldn't understand if there were any transferable, useful skills, and so I was getting rejected before interview at companies that would have gladly given me a job 3 years before. I'm a first-class honors degree student. I went to Cass Business School. I've had top grades pretty much consistently across my life. And I couldn't get a job anywhere. And so at that time, I was like, what am I going to do? Like, I have no idea what I'm going to do to pay the bills or survive. And I just started trying to share what I'd learned in private meetings, in groups, and everywhere. And what I started to realize that a lot of my friends who'd now been working for a number of years were experiencing stress and burnout and the challenges that come with leading a fast-paced corporate lifestyle. And so they started inviting me into their companies to share my journey and why I'd taken another path. And so it was almost organic. This is 2013, where companies were just getting introduced to mindfulness and meditation, and that kind of buzz in Silicon Valley was just starting out. And so almost I was someone who'd had some authentic experience, and so people wanted to hear from me. And so I started building frameworks and models from what I'd learned for companies. And then I ended up getting a job at Accenture, where not only did I go on and learn so many great skills from a business and media and digital strategy perspective, but I actually went on to teach mindfulness and meditation inside the company while being an employee. And so I really got to see the value of these tools inside a company.
Well, you're clearly made for this, Jay, and you clearly put in the work to understand it. And you're obviously, I mean, it oozes out of you, the excitement and how you like piecing this stuff together. And obviously the world feels it. You can feel it through digital media really quick. People sense authenticity through video in about 10 seconds. That's why I love the medium. So I'm just glad that you found your way there. And sometimes it's nice to hit those real lows. It helps you later get the highs, I think.
Yeah, it also just helps me really, truly believe it when I say to people that, I used to feel that way too. Like, I get it. Like, I really, really get it when you're confused and you're lost and you're stuck and you feel like there's no way out and you can't see the future and you can't even envision it. And the whole, believe in yourself first. I didn't believe in myself. I just had to act. I just had to do. I just had to take this step. And I'm not discounting needing belief in yourself, but I can say I didn't believe that anything was going to happen. I just took the steps and learned and grew and consistently tried to push myself to evolve. And so, yeah, I think for me, it's given me a great sense of empathy. When I see someone's block, instead of judging that block and being like, how can you have that block? Come on, just get on with it. It's like in my head, I'm like, no, I get it. I had that block too. Like, I can empathize and be compassionate towards that block because I had it very strongly.
Yeah, and it's so important. Action's just so crucial these days just to move forward. Look, I want to get into the book, and the book is excellent, by the way. There's so much really good stuff there. But first, we should probably talk about what's been going on in the world the last 4 or 5 months, because it's been a crazy time. And, maybe we start with fear, because it's all really based around fear, everything that's happened, and a lot of different things have happened. But there's something that you say, I'm going to quote something you've said before, and you said, quote, "During my time as a monk, I learned to lose my fear of fear, so that instead of allowing it to motivate me in negative ways, such as avoiding punishment, humiliation, or failure, I'm now able to recognize the opportunities that fear signals." I'm curious about how you got that relationship with fear and how you can process it, because, we live in a brand new world now with fear.
Yes, absolutely. And first of all, I just want to say, and I mean this, that what the world has experienced in the last 5 to 6 months is such an extreme test of tolerance and our ability to be resilient and ability to overcome fear, that if anyone feels that they have not held it together, they shouldn't judge themselves. Because it's almost like you can't take the hardest test of all time and expect to come out passing flying colors without any preparation beforehand. And so, if anything, what should happen for us, instead of feeling guilty and sad about not responding in a perfect way, whatever that is we should actually feel encouraged that now is the time to go inward, that now is the time to build up those skills, that we should become prepared when we least expect it, because who knows what is out there. And so the preparation, my favorite example from the Bhagavad Gita is of Arjun, who's a warrior and a fighter. It's almost like the fighter doesn't go out on the battlefield and hope that they have the skills. They train every single day so that when the battle appears, that they're ready. What's happened in all of our lives is we've had zero training and zero preparation, and all of a sudden you're thrown into this battlefield. And of course, none of us can completely hold it together. So for me, I see it as more of a wake-up call and a cry to all of us to say, please use your time to feel prepared, to feel ready, to grow and invest in yourself, so that next time, no matter what it is that comes our way, that you're prepared and you have the quality to stay still. That's the first thing I'd start with. But how you started with fear when you start that training is that the first thing that fear does is it should hopefully connect you to wanting to build up the skills to deal with that fear. But actually, a lot of our responses, as we know through psychology, and I talk about them in the book, a lot of our responses are we freeze, we get stuck, right? We go, okay, I'm stuck. Or we run away. We run away and we try and avoid these issues. Or we bury ourselves and we try and forget about them. And so our responses to fear, what we don't realize, create more fear, because you only become more fearful about something the less you know about it. Because the less you know about it means there's more unknown. Why do we fear the darkness? Because it's unknown. Why do we fear what's beyond our solar system? Because we don't know. It's when we don't know that we're in fear. If you are playing a team in another sport and you don't know their strengths, you'll feel fearful. If you're about to walk into a tourist destination and you don't know the ins and outs of it, you'll feel fear because it's an unknown place. So it's crazy to me that we remain in a state of unknowingness in our own lives and emotions because we feel scared of actually getting intimate with our fear. We get scared of being present and close to our fear. And that's why we try and put fear to the back of our minds. We try and run away from it. So the first thing to do is when you feel that there's something that you're scared of or upset about, a common example is how we all avoid conflict. No one likes tough conversation. And what I started to do was, rather than try and run away from tough conversations and try and find excuses and answers, I would try and find the easiest option in the beginning for me to just come out and share the truth or where I was at with it. A good example, funnily enough, is today's podcast. So I was late for today's podcast for a legitimate reason, because I'm working with someone and they needed my time. And my fear response was, oh God, Brian's going to be so upset. His team's like waited late in London. We could just make up an excuse to make them all feel better and just patch it all up. And I was like, no, I'm not going to take that option. I'm going to call up James and I'm going to tell him exactly what happened, be really honest about it. And I'm going to face it because that's the best I can do. And actually that relieves all of us of any pressure and stress. And whether you take it the right way or the wrong way, that's not it's not my responsibility, or it's not my decision for how you respond, because that is your own mind and that is your own decision. But I need to get close to my fear. So the first thing I'd say is, when you have a fear response, instead of running away from it or trying to figure out how to get away from it or avoid it, ask yourself, what am I truly fearful of? Where is this fear coming from? And continue to ask yourself, when you come up with a fear, and I call it the why ladder in the book, when you come up with a fear, so I give the example in the book that, and let's take a more common example. So you may say, I am fearful of COVID. And that's a very normal fear to have, nothing wrong with it. And I think that's the other problem. We think our fears are wrong. So then we don't want to get intimate with them.
Right.
But I would say, okay, well, why are you afraid of COVID? And you may say, I'm afraid because I might lose my job. And you say, okay, why are you afraid of losing your job? Because I need to pay the bills and I need to take care of my family. Why do you think that paying the bills is what's going to take care of your family and everything else? Because I need to put food on the table. Why do you need to put food on the table? Because I want my family to feel loved and cared for and nourished. Why do you want your family to feel loved and cared for and nourished? Because I love them. And then you realize, wait a minute, what they're really looking for is love. And if I can, even in this pain, choose to give them love, then I'm actually giving them what they need. And now I'll find all the ways to make the money, figure out my business, get food on the table and do that. But if I really realize that what I'm scared of is that COVID is going to stop me from giving love to my family. And that's actually not true. You can give love to your family. And then hopefully in that stress-free of like letting go of that, you actually give yourself the energy to go and figure out the other stuff. And so I'm not saying that losing your job means you can just do this activity and you'll be free of fear. What I'm saying is that it's your fear that's blocking you from finding the focus to solve the situation. And doing this why ladder exercise actually helps you realize what you think you're being blocked from. But usually that's right within your control. Nothing is blocking you from that.
Yeah, our fears tell us so much. But like you said, we want to run away from them, the fight or the flight mechanism. But I mean, even to take that deeper, why are you afraid of COVID? Because I'm going to die. Okay, this is a little bit touchier. Why are you afraid to die? You go a few more downs and it's like, because I've never done what I want to do with my life. I've never done anything important. Okay, maybe it's time to do something important now. You can really start getting deep. It's great to have these conversations. Well, I'm fearful of this secret getting out. Okay, well, why are you afraid of that? Well, because then no one will love me. It's like, well, no, actually the people that never loved you won't love you, but the people that will, they will. So maybe it's time you tell them the secret. I mean, you can go down a bunch of ladders, and I love the why ladder a lot in the book because, I've had this conversation a lot with myself recently, and then over the years when I've talked about my past and things have come out, and most of your fears not only are usually unfounded, but they're usually ways to unlock all of this love and potential when you actually go there. Again, it's a process, like you said. So understanding when you see a fear that you can kind of process it the way you teach, that's really powerful, super powerful.
Yeah, and thank you for that example that you've just given. I think that's the beauty of the why ladder, that if you just keep asking yourself that question, you get to the root of the issue. And the world we live in is always trying to distract us into the leaves and the branches and all of that kind of stuff. And it's like, imagine you were growing a plant and you kept watering the leaf and you kept trimming the leaf and making the leaf perfect. Tomorrow, the wind's gonna come across, blow that leaf off. And because you forgot to water the root, even the tree or the plant could fall over. But if you focused on watering the root of the tree every day, each leaf is going to have the exact nutrients that it needs. And so our mind and our lives are like that because we keep trying to solve the next drama, we keep trying to solve the next issue, we keep trying to solve the next problem, that we're distracted from the root of the issue. And the why ladder forces you to go to the root of the issue and deal with that. Like you said, really, I'm scared of dying because I haven't really done what I want to do. And yes, that's hard to face, but if you never face it, it continues to haunt you in the background.
Yeah, one of my guests recently, who's been very controversial and has made us kind of world famous, his name is David Icke, and at the end of his shows, he said, Brian, we are an expression of infinite consciousness having a brief experience called life. And he says that over and over again. And when you put it that way, you realize that you're trying to hold on to this thing that seems like the big deal, but it's actually this tiny little slice of, if you really can connect to the rest of the universe and realize you're part of this whole consciousness, then even your life isn't as important as you thought it used to be. And maybe it can change your whole relationship with the world and the people you love. And so, this is maybe even a beautiful way of getting in touch with your own mortality, COVID to a certain extent, if you can look at it that way. Otherwise, it can be one of the most challenging, debilitating experiences out there. And we've seen a lot of stress and anxiety in America. In the book, you say that, research has shown that the stress has gone up 30% in one of the most economically developed places in the world. I mean, what's the solution for America? You live there now, And versus the place where you used to sleep in India where there was like nothing, you see where you're in LA where there's like everything, and everyone's more stressed out.
Yeah, it's, it is definitely.
To continue watching the rest of the episode for free, visit our website londonreal.tv or click the link in the description below.